the Nintendo lawsuit against Palworld and Pocket Pair has finally got some actual concrete information behind it. Because initially, Nintendo and the Pokémon Company simply said, we're going to sue you, and didn't entirely elaborate on what they planned to do to Pocket Pair and why exactly Pocket Pair had apparently infringed one of their patents. Now Pocket Pair has revealed the details that they have been provided by Nintendo and the Pokémon Company. And it turns out things are kind of worse than I had hoped. This is, I said in my previous video that this was a bit of a petty lawsuit, but petty doesn't begin to describe what is going on here. As a lot of people had kind of expected, Nintendo and the Pokémon Company are suing Pocket Pair for infringements to mostly Pokémon Legends Arceus incurred by Palworld that they didn't actually have a patent on when Palworld initially launched. So Palworld initially launched on the 19th of January and all seemed fine. As I mentioned in a video at the time, the game does not appear to infringe on any of Nintendo's copyright or trademarks, and apparently did not infringe on any of the patents that Nintendo had at the time. The earliest of the patents for which Nintendo and the Pokémon Company are now suing Palworld was filed on the 26th of February 2024, so over a month after the game had actually released. Bad form does not begin to describe it. Nintendo essentially saw that this game was very similar to something that they had made, saw that it was not infringing on their copyright, saw that it was not infringing on their trademarks, so then filed a patent with the express purpose, it appears, of suing Pocket Pair. Like, that may not have been the entire reason why they filed that patent, but certainly that's the way things appear if we're looking at this from an outside perspective. The patents involved with this lawsuit are basically the things that people kind of suspected were going to be the issue. The first one, and probably the bigger one of the lot, is the idea of throwing an object in order to capture a creature that is in the game world. And that the patent specifically mentions that it's okay for, and a lot of games feature the mechanic of being in a role-playing game battle and then throwing a ball in that environment in order to capture a monster. But the idea of being in an open game world and just walking around and seamlessly being able to take out a ball and throw it at a monster in order to catch it, that's the thing that they've now patented. So this is something that Palworld was doing prior to the patent being filed, but it is now something that Nintendo says, no, we had the idea first, so we definitely get to control that because it was in the game Pokémon Legends Arceus. Two of the patents essentially boil down to this basic idea. I'm not going to go into all of the details here. There will be somebody else on YouTube who makes a far more thorough video at a later date. I'm just making the most basic YouTube version of this so that you have a vague understanding of what the lawsuit is all about. So two of them are about that ball throwing in the wild mechanic. The third one is about being able to climb on a creature and ride it around in that open world space. So essentially, what Nintendo and the Pokémon Company are doing here are trying to control the idea not of monster catching games in general, but specifically of monster catching games in an open world environment, which is going to be a surprise to some people because it didn't seem like an idea that Nintendo or the Pokémon Company seemed very invested or very bothered about putting a lot of work into. Like, yes, Pokémon Legends Arceus has reviewed relatively well for a Pokémon game, but if there's one thing that Pokémon fans have been calling out for quite a while, it is a truly open world, expansive, very detailed Pokémon game that is not constrained to following specific paths, or instead being locked into specific areas within the map, but instead having a more free-roaming open world experience akin to Breath of the Wild. This is something then that Palworld delivered on, plus the promise of guns, because why not? And so Nintendo and the Pokémon Company have chosen this specific issue to say, no, we are the only ones who are allowed to make a truly open world Pokémon game. We'll get to making a good one with some actual polish any day now. That's the challenge with this lawsuit, is Nintendo and the Pokémon Company are essentially trying to monopolize the concept of an open world mon-like. And that would mean that they would be the only people, thanks to patents, who would be able to make that kind of game, unless somebody were to come up with a workaround for a different kind of mechanic. But then, as said, Nintendo didn't have a patent on this mechanic when Palworld was initially launched. The thing I find really interesting about this, though, is nothing to do with the patents themselves, nothing to do with the specific points that Nintendo and the Pokémon Company are quibbling over here. It's the claim itself. It's the retribution that they are expecting. It is the things that Pocket Pair has to give them. And it's not a lot in terms of financial retribution. The claim seeks for 5 million yen to be paid by Pocket Pair to the Pokémon Company and 5 million yen to be paid by Pocket Pair to Nintendo. 5 million yen works out at about £26,000, about 32,000 US dollars. This is not a lot of money, and it is a drop in the ocean compared to how much money Pocket Pair has actually generated from Palworld. The claim also seeks late payment damages, etc, so it's not just that small amount of 5 million yen to each of these companies, but in terms of how much money Nintendo and the Pokémon Company are asking for, it's not a lot. When Nintendo sued and won its case against ROM Universe was ordered to pay Nintendo $2.1 million, which is huge compared to the amount that Pocket Pair is being sued for. When Nintendo sued and won its case against hacker Gary Bowser, Bowser was ordered to pay $4.5 million US dollars. Again, a huge amount of money compared to the relatively small amount that Nintendo and the Pokémon Company are suing Pocket Pair for. Of course, none of these lawsuits are actually about money, they are all ideological, and it's just interesting that Nintendo and the Pokémon Company have set the bar so low in terms of finance for this one, when this is the only lawsuit of the three that I have mentioned where they are suing somebody who actually has millions in their bank account, Pocket Pair founder Takuro Mizobi. Like, they're finally suing somebody who has the wherewithal to actually pay them the money that they are suing for, and this is the one where they're like, nah, just like £26,000, that'll do. The other claim for this lawsuit is an injunction against Palworld, which is essentially to say Palworld must cease. You cannot Palworld any longer. So essentially, Nintendo and the Pokémon Company are looking at a game that plays very similar to one that they have, and instead of chalking it up to just the games industry, oh well, clones happen, which is what most companies do in this kind of circumstance, they have gone out of their way to specifically file patents that means that they control gameplay concepts within the game that has already launched by this point, which is similar to gameplay concepts in Pokemon Legends Arceus, and they say, no, we are the only ones who are able to make this kind of open world monster catching game where you throw an object and catch a monster, and you climb on a monster and then fly that monster around the game world. Needless to say, this is bad news for gamers because it means that the kinds of Pokemon-inspired games that people can make are going to be dramatically reduced, especially given that nobody going forward knows whether or not Nintendo are just going to file another patent and then sue you retroactively for something that you have done in a game that has already been published. I just want to put up one more disclaimer to say that I'm doing this video in the most basic form possible. There will be other people who give more thorough breakdowns of this lawsuit and of the patents involved, and I please hope that you will be patient with me in as much as I've probably said some things incorrectly or used incorrect terminology or maybe not described the patents as thoroughly as possible and all of the specific nuances of them. I'm just hoping to get across the basics of it here, and you can go elsewhere. I'll put some links in the description as they pop up to places that will be able to tell you exactly point after point after point what we're looking at here. Indeed, I wouldn't have made this video at all if it weren't for the fact that this is clearly a hot topic, and this is clearly something that I feel like Nintendo needs to be called out on, because this is really bad form in terms of how you run a game company, because nobody likes a monopoly. This is not good for consumers one way or the other. We are not going to get anything from this. The fact that Nintendo is so fierce here in shutting down their competition, using fairly murky business practices in order to do so, means that whatever's coming next from the Pokemon Company, even though it's almost certainly going to be another open world game, I wouldn't necessarily speak to its quality when their approach is more on taking down competitors than on making sure that whatever game they put out is going to be of the highest possible standards. I would like to be very wrong on that. I would love for you to be able to fill the comments on this video with "this aged like milk" when Nintendo announces an absolutely beautiful, really well thought out, really well funded, really well developed, really polished Pokemon open world game, because really that would be about the only thing that would bring me back to the series at this point. I've long since got to the point where I am tired of endless annual releases that have less and less and less polish to them. That said, Pokemon Scarlet is on my daughter's Christmas list, so you're getting at least one more from us, Game Freak. Well done, you. And also, to be honest, I'd probably play an awful lot more Pokemon if my daughter had ever been particularly fussed about Pokemon. For some reason, it's just not a franchise that she cares about. Super into Splatoon, super into Zelda, pretty happy with Mario, just no interest in Pokemon, and I have absolutely no idea why, and that's sad to me because I love Pokemon. I think it's great when it's done well. So if you happen to be a game developer watching this video and wondering how to avoid getting sued by Nintendo, the short answer is you can't. You can absolutely not guarantee that Nintendo will not find some excuse to sue you. Once upon a time, I was going to make a video called How to Not Get Sued by Nintendo. At this point, I feel like I no longer can be certain at any point with anything. In fact, it is at the point now where I want to stop using all Nintendo footage in my videos just in case Nintendo decides to change their Content ID/YouTube copyright policy. I guess the moral of the story is that the house always wins. That's depressing. I'm really interested to see how this lawsuit goes because I don't rate Pocket Pair's chances anymore. I feel like even if they manage to scrape a win with this one, Nintendo will find another patent. They will file something else. They will come up with a new excuse and just keep bashing away at this until Pocket Pair is just taken apart by lawsuits. Well, that's depressing. The end.